Clawdbot, Moltbot, or OpenClaw. It's the dream for some, an AI assistant that actually does things instead of just writing poetry. But right now, it's more like a brilliant intern who also happens to be a high-functioning arsonist. And in no time at all, you can actually destroy your entire business just as fast as you set things up. So in this video, we're going to build a better, saner version, one that automates your entire life without nuking your reputation. You can grab it in the description below. Let's get into this. I think that should summarize it pretty nicely. Let's see what this thing goes away and builds while I take a break. And here we are, look at that. About 25 minutes later, we have this amazing looking prototype without actually doing anything. So obviously it had a little bit of context around my business, but I don't think it used a lot of it. It took out the Atom framework, which we've got somewhere down here. Order, transform, optimize, maintain, but it put it in these little boxes. Obviously I would change some of the colors and make it look a lot better. My actual website is better than this, but considering the little amount of information that I gave it, it's pretty amazing. It even gave us some testimonials. So, you know, this is a great thing. Build trust through lies, because these are obviously not real. I think that's the best way to grow in 2026. So before we look at rebuilding OpenClaw in a better way, we need to understand what's actually happening in this environment in terms of the frameworks that we're already using. Because even though OpenClaw, Moltbot, whatever the hell it's called, is really amazing, it's not something entirely new, because people have been building in agentic frameworks for ages now. And we've been doing just that as well. So for those of you who don't really care about these frameworks, just skip ahead in the timestamp. But for those of you who want to learn and actually see how all of this works so that you can implement it for clients or actually just get a fundamental understanding of how all of this stuff fits together, then stick around. I definitely would, because it's really just plain English that we're going to be looking at. So we've got two files, and the first one we're going to look at is our Claude MD. Now, this isn't a Claude skill in the traditional sense. You can think of this more as a system handbook, and it governs our entire system, whether it's in VS Code or anti-gravity. Whatever IDE you choose, this little file can live in there. And again, you could use this with Gemini, you could use it with Codex, whatever the hell you wanted. It's really just a system handbook as opposed to the traditional skill. So we're using something called the Gotcha framework. And this thing exists because the problem with LLMs is that they are probabilistic, meaning one time you ask it something and it will give you one answer, the next time it might give you something completely different. So what we aim to do here is bridge that gap between the probabilistic nature of AI with something more deterministic like Python scripts or any type of scripts, to be honest, so that we get the same result every single time for a specific system that we're using, whether it's in business or life. So for instance, if we wanted to build some end-to-end workflows, if we just used AI, it might give us a workflow that runs this way a single time, but then the next time it might do something completely different. But with our little environment over here, we make sure we get the exact output that we need every single time when we're building something, or if we're writing an email, or if we're reaching out to people for cold outreach on LinkedIn, stuff like that. We want to make sure we have that deterministic stuff that always follows the same pattern. But then equally, we also want something that can build stuff for us, build apps for us, build websites. And this can also do that, especially when it's tied in with our second framework that we're going to look at very shortly. But first, we need to explore this one. So it's called the Gotcha framework, and it's broken down into 6 layers. So the first thing are just goals, and you can literally think of these as tasks that we want to achieve in our business or standard operating procedures. The second thing is the orchestration layer, and that's currently this environment that we're speaking to here. So in this case, it's Claude. And then next up, we have tools, and these are really just scripts. In this case, we're using Python, but you can use any language that you want, really, as long as they can get the job done. And then we also have context, because that's really important. So this thing has all the context of my entire business in it, which makes it really easy for this system to go and pull out specific things about my ICP, what we do as a business, who I am, my personal story, stuff like that, so I can put it into content or whatever it is that I want. It has the examples that it needs to do that. So context is really important. Even if you don't have a full-blown RAG, just having some MD files is super important step forward when you're trying to have a multi-agent system like this that can build you whatever you want. After that, we have our hard prompts, and we stash them all over here because that means that we can run regression testing on them without having to run them through a specific Python script. But ultimately, these are all going to get pushed into the Python scripts that live in the tools so that we can go and call LLMs or whatever it is that we need to do with these prompts. And then finally, we have our arguments, and these are just behavioral settings or variables that we're putting in at runtime for specific things that need to change. And for the most part, this 6-step framework can do a lot of the stuff, if not most of the stuff that Moltbot or OpenClaw can do without most of the security hassle that it actually introduces. There are just a few other things that I'm aware of that Moltbot can obviously do, like persistent memory and things like that, but we're going to do a gap analysis very soon. So coming further down into this file, I'm not going to keep you much longer. We just explain to Claude exactly how each of these layers work in detail. We give it some bullet points of how we want it to behave for specific things. We give it some manifests for our tools. so that every single time it goes through this, it doesn't have to search for every single tool inside our folder over here. It just checks the manifest and sees, oh, hey, this thing already exists. Cool, I don't need to rebuild this. I can just use this. And if it doesn't exist, then I know I need to build it. So these manifests really help us govern the system as well, because if we have a specific goal that we're trying to reach, let's say we want to automate all our lead gen, we would have a goal for that. And if it didn't exist, this thing would know, hey, I need to go and build that. So it all works hand in hand, and it's kind of similar to how Moltbot actually works. But then if we come a little bit further down, after we've told it to check for existing things, we also tell it what to do when it fails. So it creates this self-healing loop that you see Moltbot doing, because it's going through this loop and it says, okay, I didn't know how to do that. Let's try again. And that's essentially what we're doing here. If it finds an error, we figure out why it happened. We document why it happened so that it doesn't happen again. And then we try something else, and it goes on and on and on until eventually we win. And this is a really important part because it helps the system learn and grow and adapt. But more importantly, it means you can go to gym and just let this thing keep doing its thing, which I've literally done for quite a lot of builds, especially large things using Docker and enterprise software and stuff like that as POCs for some of my clients. So it's actually really amazing in terms of how it does that and how it can reverse engineer things for you. But then also we want to make sure that it doesn't hallucinate. So we put in this little thing over here just to tell us if it doesn't understand something, don't make shit up. So it explains what's missing, why is it missing, why can't it make this thing work, and it might ask some follow-up questions or suggest a different solution if something is entirely impossible. Then most importantly, we have our guardrails, as every system should. These aren't very thorough. It's just a few basic checks that I put in place to make sure that this thing doesn't email someone to jump off of a bridge or something like that. And then I also have very specific things to never delete my YouTube videos because it's linked to my channel. It needs to ask me 3 times if it ever wants to delete anything. So that's really just some basic guardrails. And arguably, if I had to put in another LLM and get it to assess this file, it would say you need to add maybe 50 other guardrails, depending on how serious we want it to be about it. But like I said, I'm pretty technical, so I know what I'm doing and I know what not to allow this thing to do when it comes down to doing things. And then as we get to the end of this, we just see the file structure that we let this thing know we want. And that's how we built this little left-hand side column over here with all of our folder structure. We list all of our manifests, and we talk about what to do in one sentence, which is essentially just take commands from me and then build it like a good little worker. So this file is vital for everything that we're about to do. And like I said, it's going to get us most of the way that Moltbot can do. But then we need to look at one more file that goes in with this, because this is the file that builds all of our apps. So if we come on over to build app, which as you see is a goal, just a standard operating procedure as we'll soon go through, we're using something called the Atlas workflow here. And our goal for this specific case is to build full stack applications using AI assistants within the Gotcha framework. So this file lives within this governing body that we just spoke about. And whenever I say build me an app that does XYZ, it will load this build app.md. And obviously the goal here is to build full stack applications. But the most important part here is that I don't want it to just kind of vibe its way through building an app. Yes, it can totally do that, but we want to try to tie this to some form of structure that would actually happen in software development lifecycle, where we actually have something that's far more robust and something that's actually been tested. If you look at a lot of the videos out there right now, most of the people just do like a 20-minute video on how I built X without doing any testing, monitoring, observability. There's literally no talk of any of that, but arguably it's the most important part. So really we need a system that bakes that stuff in, and that's where the Atlas framework steps in. Again, it's a 5-step process. The first one being architect. So we define the problem, the users, the success metrics and things like that, where we kind of establish our definition of done. And this forms part of context engineering, which I have an entire video on. You should definitely watch that, because it's how you're going to get the most out of every single LLM that you speak to or your agent workflows. But arguably anything in life that you're doing, if you cannot describe a definition of done, it means you don't understand the problem well enough, in which case this thing's probably going to vibe something that it builds for you. And of course it can. That's the whole point of vibe coding. But arguably, if you know exactly what you want, you can describe the problem very clearly. And most importantly, you can describe your definition of done very clearly. You're going to get a much better system a lot faster. So this step is probably the most important step in the entire app building phase. Then next up we have T, and that is trace. So where you list all of your data schemas, your integration maps, your stack proposals, basically all the things that we're going to use in order to build this product and make our dreams come alive. Then we have link, where we validate all the connections that we're building. So if we have APIs or MCP servers, things like that, we're going to validate all these connections exist before we start building anything. Then we have the assemble phase, and this is where we build using the layered architecture. So we're not just going to run straight away and build the most flashiest looking, best functioning app ever. No, we start with basic functionality, because with prototyping, your main goal is to get to wherever you want to go as fast as possible to figure out if this thing actually works. You're not going there to build this amazing flashy product as fast as possible. We just want to test functionality. Once we've done that, once we know everything works and our idea is possible, then we just chuck in all the flashy stuff and we make it work as fast as we can, scaling up and up and up in a layered structure. And then finally, we have the stress test phase. And again, this is also really important. We need to test the functionality. We need to check for error handling. We need to bake in error handling in our builds and bake in some monitoring and observability and all of those things. So this Atlas framework is really important. But for this environment of mine, I've kind of dumbed it down a little bit. I haven't done any verbose monitoring and logging and observability, which is why you see these 2 lines underneath here that I've commented for prod builds. So when I ask this thing specifically for a prod build, it's going to add in a validation layer where we really look at security and input sanitization and edge cases and really complex stuff. And then also the proper monitoring, which we can hook up to Helicone or other such things. But if you stuck around this long, well done you. I hope this was kind of useful. I don't want to bore you through an entire file of everything that we do here. These will be available for you to download, and you'll be able to do pretty much anything that you want using these 2 files already. But we're obviously going to take away some of the things from Moltbot or OpenClaw because it can do some amazing things that this system cannot do yet. One of them being persistent memory. So this morning, I came up with an idea to figure out how we can augment this system to make it even better. So all I did was I came into my environment, opened up a fresh chat of Claude Code, and I said, hey, do some research on Moltbot/OpenClaw, figure out what it is, why it's so great, and do a gap analysis on what we're doing in our environment compared to what that thing can do. With the goal here being that we want to bridge the gap. So our goal here is to build Moltbot equivalent or better functionality within the existing Gotcha framework, demonstrating it's achievable without security nightmares, because that's what I want to focus on in this thing, is that for some unknown reason, Moltbot is insanely insecure, but equally having a community with like however many skills Moltbot now has is ridiculous, because if you have something like this that can build anything for you, you do not need to rely on the community to build things for you, which means you can build your own secure Python scripts. You can build your own secure environment without needing to rely on any of that stuff. So just a quick refresh on the security nightmare that is currently Moltbot. There's no guardrails by default. It executes any command with unlimited permissions. Now, obviously, I'm going to be doing that in my environment, but at least you have the option to choose how you want this thing to behave, and you can bake in some guardrails yourself. But then there's also credential exposure, where it leaks plain text API keys via prompt injection. Because everybody is YOLOing this entire thing, they don't really understand these security concerns, so they're putting all this stuff in plain text. And now there's also a thing called Moltbook, where these agents are talking to each other in a forum about some of the problems that they're facing, which I think is amazing, by the way. But that's going to cause even more problems, because then these exposed plain text things are just going to end up in these Moltbook forums where they're all sharing this secret information. So again, making the problem worse. Skill poisoning. 26% of analyzed skills contain vulnerabilities. So everything you're getting from the community is poison. Data exfiltration. Skills can silently curl data to external servers, which is insane. And then supply chain risk, local file installation from community skills. Cool. So I'm not going to go into these in details. There's tons of videos online already. We're here for the specific thing of making this environment that is already amazing even more amazing by bridging this gap. So if we look at Moltbot versus my environment over here, persistent memory. It uses a memory.md plus daily logs plus vector search. All I have are SQLite DBs, and they're task specific. So I don't have memory for everything. It doesn't remember everything that we do. So the gap here is high. No cross-session conversational memory. We can definitely fix that. Then next up, we have semantic search. So they're using SQLite VEC and BM25 hybrid. I don't have any. So the gap here is high. Can't find similar content, which is problematic. Then we have the messaging gateway. So right now I only have Slack, but that's by choice. It's not really a limitation. I can hook up Telegram, and I'm going to do that as part of this. Proactive notifications, heartbeat cron, and scheduled briefings. I have batch automation where I get news and leads and things like that. So the gap here is low. You have this, just not messaging integrated, and that's by choice. I don't really give a shit about any of this. I just want the system to go and do its job. Like if I'm reaching out to leads, I push all of my stuff into HeyReach, which then goes into LinkedIn, and automatically does what I need it to do. I don't want to know about that. I just want to see people accepting my connection requests, accepting my first message to start a conversation, and then I take over as the human, because I don't want AI driving that kind of stuff. Then in terms of Moltbot, it has an always-on agent. So background Node.js service, easy enough to set up. I just haven't done that because I haven't needed to. So we're going to set up a persistent daemon. Tools library, I don't care about that at all. They have 700 community skills that are poison. I have 100 deterministic tools that I've built myself in here just by asking this thing. So we have no gap here because ours are more mature and more secure by default. Then security, that's just YOLO mode, no guardrails at all. We have some separation of concerns, which was the gotcha framework we spoke about and the Atlas framework. So we're already safer, but I think we could definitely get a lot more guardrails put in that I may or may not put in at some point. So then it just came down here and it thought about the plan on how we're going to bridge the gap. Persistent memory. This is our highest priority because I don't have any of this, and I agree, this is the thing that we need to fix the most. So Moltbot's approach is to use markdown files, a memory.md plus daily logs plus SQLite plus vector embeddings. We'll match this exactly with better security. So we're going to be building a folder on the left here, just like all of these other things that we have. We're going to call it memory. Inside there, we're going to have a memory.md, which is the long-term facts and preferences. That's all human readable because it's in Markdown, which for those of you who don't know is just the file extension we've been reading this whole time. Then it's going to create a logs folder, which I've already got over here. You can see because I've baked in some error logging for some of the things that I've built. Also that you clear them down. So for error logs, you don't want to keep them there because they're just going to burn up space if you had a lot of errors. Point being, we're going to have a logs folder for this, which is the daily append only logs. So again, that'll be human readable. And then we have an index.json, which is really important so we can do fast lookup, like we've got with our manifest and other such files for our tools. So it's going to build a whole bunch of new tools as well. Tools and then memory, memory.db, and this is going to be our SQLite CRUD for memory entries and embeddings. And CRUD is just create, read, update, and delete. Simple database, nothing special. It's going to do that a few times over here for all of our memory function. And then we talk about the database schema over here. And you can see while I'm doing this, it's actually using our two frameworks. So it's not just using the gotcha framework where it orchestrates this entire thing. It's also using Atlas because as part of Atlas, we talk about the architecture up front, but we also talk about the data schema. And the schema is just how everything lives in the database. So this is important stuff like ID, type, content, things that we might want to manipulate in other systems somewhere down the line. Whenever you're building something for someone, you want to make sure you have a really good data schema from the beginning because it's going to help you when you're building added agents or the next step of your process. Anyway, I thought I would just flash that while we're going through this. So here it's creating our database structure and the Claude.md update. So it's also suggested an update to our main Claude.md, which is obviously important. We need to make this thing aware at an orchestration layer that it now has memory and it can use it. So it's suggesting at session start, read memory.md for core facts and preferences. Step 2, read today's log. Step 3, read yesterday's log if it exists. During the session, append notable events via memorywrite.py. Update memory.md for explicit new preferences. Before context compaction, run memoryflush.py to preserve critical context. That's also really important. So before it gets rid of something that we might actually need as part of our memory, it's going to make sure that it updates this file. I want to see if it's actually able to do that because that's really cool. Then vector search using SQLite VEC. This is just to grab all of our embeddings and run vector search. Cost estimate, $0.2 per million tokens for embeddings. Cool. I don't really care about costs. So I suppose another benefit of using this that I should have mentioned up front, if I didn't do that in the intro, is we should be using Claude Opus 4.5 for this, which I use for everything in this environment. I am on the max plan. But equally, I don't have to rely on using an API and therefore incurring more costs as you would with OpenClaw. So that's another benefit of using this. Then phase 2 is to set up our messaging gateway via NetN for Slack and Telegram. Use NetN as a secure proxy, not direct API. I might question this and just YOLO it directly through my environment. I don't want to set up NetN and have to publish it and stuff. This thing can obviously build it in a flash, but I would argue why. We could just build something securely ourselves. I think it's taken this approach because I told it that I wanted to be more secure. And arguably this is more secure because NetN is verified. Why Slack and Telegram, not WhatsApp? Slack, you already have it working. Telegram, better bot API, no business verification required, and it's free. True story. So then it just talks a little bit about that, and we get to phase 3, our proactive heartbeat system, which will run on a cron schedule. Morning briefing, calendar reminder, weekly review. Okay. We can always expand this if we needed to, but I think that sounds all right. The purpose of our morning briefing is to summarize the calendar, the tasks, and the news, check content calendar for due items, weekly activity summary. That's all pretty useful stuff. Security guardrails, unlike Moltbot. Look at it being passive aggressive. New file, Args, securityguardrails.yaml, dangerous operations. Pattern, rm-rf. For those of you who don't know what that is, that basically means it's just going to remove whatever you tell it to without asking about it. So that's pretty dangerous. You would never want to execute that kind of thing because it can literally just wipe everything on the drive. Pattern, git push force. Yep, we don't want that. YouTube delete, that's already baked in. So just some very basic stuff. And then finally, we need an audit database. So auditing your environment is really important, especially if you're doing something like this, so you can see who did what action the user took. Obviously, it's really important when you're working for a business, but arguably for myself as well, I want to know what actions this thing took. So if we ever wanted to troubleshoot something, we'd have that as well as part of the audit logs. It thinks it's going to take weeks to do this, but little does it know my little slave is going to be working all night to build this for me so that we can post this video as fast as possible. And I think I've read through this enough. Let's just go through here and auto-accept this thing. And so, just like Moltbot, this thing's already doing what Moltbot can do, just in a more secure way, straight out the bat. And once we have all of this new functionality, we will essentially have Moltbot, just better. And while we wait for that thing to build, I might as well just show people who might not know how to set all of this up for yourself really, really easily. It's probably easier to do than Moltbot. So all you need to do is download an IDE. You can use VS Code, anti-gravity, whatever it is that you want to use. And then you're going to come on over here, and you're just going to create a new folder structure. So you come on over to this left over here with the documents. You can click open folder, and all this is obviously just a folder on your drive. We're going to create a new one, and we're going to call it Moltbot test. I'm going to put that over there, and I'm just going to click open. And now you see that we just have an environment that looks like the other one that's currently building away. The only thing that's missing are the files that we need in order to do that, and the Claude extension. So the first thing we're going to have a look at are how to get the extension. You can come on over here to this little thing that looks like a puzzle piece and click extensions. Now, some of them might be pre-installed for you as part of VS Code, but something that you're definitely going to need to get is Claude Code, because obviously that's going to be orchestrating this whole thing. Now you can use Codex if you want to, or any other LLM that's available inside here. I'm just using Claude because I've got that max subscription. So all I would do is click on this, and then there would be an install button here for me instead of disable. So I would click install and job done. Once we've gotten that, all you need to do is drag in the files from the YouTube description below, and you put them into this little box over here. And you can do that simply by just literally dragging and dropping those files into this environment. Okay, now that we've got this file in there, all we need to do is start a new chat with Claude Code. So if you can't see it, you can just click on the little chat button, which will be on the right-hand side. And then we just come down here and we say, hey, this is a new environment, please initialize it. And we hit enter. And now it's going to go through our Claude.md, and it's going to do all of the instructions that we asked it to, just like in the other video. So here you can see everything's broken down. It's going to create all the folder structure that we need and pretty much everything that we need in order to run this. So yes, we do want it to run these commands, and if you're feeling brave, you can just let this thing do whatever it wants to do by bypassing permissions. So it's already done a whole bunch of stuff here. We can see our structure slowly filling up because it's a really easy file to set up. Done, got your framework initialized. So now you can see this is the exact same folder structure that I had. It just kind of doesn't have anything in it at this point because obviously it's brand new. So then one more thing that we are going to need to do is we're going to need to come to our goals folder over here, and we need to add the build_app.md file, which again is from the description below, just so that you have that Atlas framework whenever you're trying to build a specific app or something like that. You don't need it, but it's really nice to have because again, it's aligned to a really good structure when you're trying to build an app. And that's it, guys. That's all you need to do. By the time you have this file, it's going to look a little bit different because we will have the extended memory and all of the other things, that Moltbot functionality baked into the system. So you'll obviously see a few new folders compared to the time of us doing this now. But otherwise, the process is going to be identical. And coming back over here, this thing's still chugging along. It's done quite a lot on its little checklist. Now it's updating Claude.md with the memory protocol. And we've got 2 steps after that to create goals for memory management and to update the tools manifest with the new memory tools. So again, this is part of the Atlas framework where it's not just going to build stuff, it will always test everything. Now, it can't run into every single error the first time it iterates a build, but usually when I tell it to do some actual testing, it will then go and it will loop and walk through the entire process until it's done the thing that it needs to do. So phase 1 complete, memory and vector system. I've built the full Moltbot equivalent persistent memory system. We created these 2 files. We already spoke about these. 7 tools, the documentation has been updated the manifest, it's verified working. Load memory at session start using Python. Great. What's next? Phase 2 messaging gateway. Should I proceed with building the end-to-end messaging gateway? I do want to ask it, is there any specific reason we're using end-to-end apart from that security? Can we not just bake in our own security for the Telegram API? We're using native Slack integration, which I'm okay with. So can we not just do the same for Telegram? So the answer is obviously yes, we can, and we're going to. I just need to give it the Telegram API key. It's already got all of my Slack stuff set up. And again, if you were trying to do this and you didn't understand something, it would tell you step by step exactly how to do it. So for instance, if you don't know how to set up a Slack API key, or if you don't know how to set up the channel room that you need in order to get the bot to message you, it will do all of that, and then it will tell you the steps that you as a human have to take for security reasons within Slack in order to get the job done. So there's really nothing you can't do anymore now that we have these systems in place. But let's have a look over here and see why it suggested init. You already had it set up and it acts as a message routing layer. But you're right, direct integration is cleaner. Of course I'm right. I'm the human here. Telegram bot API is actually simpler than Slack. Yeah, but we're going to do both. Security we'd bake in ourselves. So we'd have a few arguments, bot token, allowed user IDs, which would only be me. Yes, rate limit per minute, 10. Really? That seems a bit low. Oh, per minute. No, okay, that's perfect. Require confirmation for file deletion, git push, API calls. Perfect. This means fewer moving parts, same security model as Slack, easier to debug. But I do want both of them. No, we're still going to use both. I was just specifically asking about the Telegram direct API. So let's go direct with both of those apps. Alrighty, so step 2 is done here. We can see that it's created our messaging.yaml with our security config, with whitelists, rate limits, things like that. And then we've got our 3 tools: send messages, files, photos, inline buttons, receive messages with security checks, conversation history tracking, security built in. Okay, set up Telegram. So this is like I was saying, if you don't know how to do something, it literally just gives you step by step on exactly how to do it. You can also get this thing to do it. So if you didn't want to come in here and add your own API keys, you could just dump it in here and it would do it for you. By the way, if I haven't explained, all of your API keys live in this .env. This is kind of what governs all of your environmental tokens and things like that. They all live in there. I'm not going to click on this because then I would have to redact the video, and that's just editing I don't need to do. It's a pretty straightforward file. It will have Telegram API equals, and then you would put in your API key. Pretty straightforward, and again, this thing will do it for you. And so our summary so far, we have memory and vector is complete, messaging is complete, proactive morning briefing, calendars and reminders, that's pending, and security is partial. So I'm not sure how far I'm going to go on the security because, again, I'm pretty technical and I like what I have now. But what I will do at the end of this is perhaps I'll just show you very simply how you can get this thing to do a security review of your environment for you. So proactive, want me to proceed with phase 3? Yes, let's go ahead and do phase 3. Thinking about phase 3 though, do I really want this thing sent to my Slack or Telegram? It could be useful, but more importantly, maybe I want to build a dashboard for this thing. I think something that might be better for phase 3 would be to include those things, but we also build a simple dashboard so that I can understand what tools we have in our environment, so that I can understand what tasks you've been working on, if any of them are still pending, if we have any processes running, essentially an entire system dashboard for our new updated bot environment. So what I'm going to do now is switch it back to plan mode. And just because it's a little bit of a bigger task, you don't really need to, because it's already planned most of the thing already, but because I added something new, I'll get a much better result if I click plan. And the reason you get a better result is because it isolates the way that this thing thinks, and it no longer accepts any tools into its workflow. It doesn't even think about using tools to get a job done. It focuses solely on just developing the perfect plan. Hence the name. I mean, at this point, I could probably just build my own Notion with this entire agent baked into it, so it can pretty much do everything. So instead of working off of the left-hand column here like I've been doing recently, I could just build this into a graphical front end. Easily possible. But whether or not it's worth it is another story, because again, the cool thing about these tools is they look amazing, they look flashy, they create hype, and it really makes for wonderful viewing on YouTube. But realistically, in terms of how a business works, sometimes you don't need a front end, sometimes you don't care about half of the things that the agent is doing. You just want the outcome, you want the result done, and you want to make sure that it's done in a secure way and a way that actually makes sense for the business, which a lot of the hype on YouTube right now is actually just not there at all. So building things like front ends look good, but are they always necessary? Do we need to remake our own Notion? I don't know. I can't really think of a reason to, because I just want this thing to deliver me my outcomes. Alrighty, phase 3 system dashboard and proactive notifications. Build a unified system dashboard showing the entire agent workforce state at a glance, plus proactive notification tools. So 73 tools, 17 workflows, memory DB, messages, the system status. Yeah, that's all really cool. Database is scheduled, and obviously we can expand this as we go along. This is just our prototype, so that's the biggest change to the plan. I'm going to accept that. And bypass permissions, and we'll flip back when that one's done. I've set up my Telegram API token. So I can just come in here, open up another chat and say, send me a test message to my Telegram. Then it's going to run away and it's going to find our tools and our goals in our environment over here and test the Telegram functionality to make sure that everything's working. Found Telegram tools and the bot token. Let me check how to use the Telegram send tool. Okay, then we're just testing the functionality. We can see here that everything's working. We can now have a back and forth with our agent when we need to. I imagine there might still be some testing because we're literally building this on video live. Okay, and this thing's been building. It's testing the dashboard right now, making sure the panels work, making sure that we have everything that we need. Just about to wrap up. Phase 3 complete, proactive notifications, all done. Okay, so that should be sending to Telegram. I'm going to open up the dashboard. Let's have a look. So that's pretty straightforward. This is like the generic template that it always outputs. But we can see a whole bunch of stuff here. I mean, I will make this prettier definitely. But just to show you, it shows me all my active employees. Now the employees are the tools that I have running or the systems that I have running, like lead gen and content creation, things like that. It's all in here. Memory.db, which tells us how much space we're using. That's pretty cool. Recent activity, a memory event, testing the new memory system. Okay, so we'd want to expand this out, but this is really just to show you a point. We can come and have a look down here. It shows you my workflows, all the tools that they use, stuff like that. That's really cool. All of the tools involved in it and the number of workflows that run through this for all of my systems in here. So that's really handy. This is like a whole thing, and I can come and search for any tools in here. Yeah, that's really handy. Again, looks like trash, but we'll make that better over time. That's not the main point of this video. Right now, we need to snap back here. Okay, cool. Now we need to test that Telegram integration is working. I know that I can send messages, as I tested that in another chat. One thing that we need to look at is that there is listening setup. So if I'm on a train or if I'm on a ship, I can text you and I can get something built remotely by sending you a message from Telegram. Have we got that functionality set up? Also keep in mind that when I do send that message, we should be running through this Claude.md that governs this entire environment. It shouldn't just be a spontaneous build. Good question. Let me check what we have for Telegram receiving and listening functionality. The polling infrastructure exists, but the critical piece is missing. Routing received messages to Claude for execution. Right now it polls, it checks the whitelist and the rate limits, it blocks dangerous patterns, but it does not route to Claude for execution. Let me check the messaging config and understand what we need to build. So yeah, we'd need to figure out a way that this system can essentially send a message from here or to Claude without using the API. So we have two options, direct Claude Code invocation or Anthropic API. Okay, we definitely don't want to use the Anthropic API because I don't want to pay for something when I've already, paid for it with my Max plan. Let's go with option A because you're already a part of my Max plan within this VS Code environment. So I want to make sure that anything that we call goes through this VS Code environment. And this machine is always on. So I didn't go out and buy a Mac Mini. I had a spare M1 MacBook Pro from back in the day. So that's my version of a Mac Mini. It always lives on. And I'm sure functionality is going to get even better with this thing, right? I think parallelization is going to be another big thing. So if we could have a whole team working on a specific build, for instance, that's something I'm going to cover in another video very soon, where we have an entire team of agents working together on a singular project without screwing the thing up, that's going to make for some really good television. See if we can pull that off. And I think the system might actually help us get there. But we'll see. Claude Code has -P print mode for non-interactive use and dangerously skip permissions for unattended operations. Let me create the handler daemon. Yeah, so that's really important. I want to be able to plan from my phone as well, and I also want to then just be able to dangerously skip the permissions. Okay, so this thing thinks that it's almost done. Claude invocation works. Let me test a more complex request that would use Claude.md governance. Claude accessed the codebase successfully and Claude.md governance is working. Let me update the to-dos and the documentation. Okay, let me test the Telegram polling with dry run mode first. There's a pending message. Let me run the actual handler to process it. The full flow works. A /start message was received, processed through Claude, and a response was sent back. Let me add the handler to the manifest. Okay, so let's have a look at this thing. It seems to think that it did it. The security chain is the only thing we have to do next. How to use start the daemon. It keeps running. Okay, we're going to get it to start it. Test Claude invocation without Telegram. Why would we want to do that? Thought we are testing Telegram here. What is this thing talking about? Okay, first off, make sure everything's running in order to test this. And why would we test invocation without Telegram when we obviously want to test Telegram functionality here? Essentially, the user flow should be, I'm going to open up Telegram, I'm going to send a message to my bot, and that bot then opens up a new invocation of you inside VS Code as a new chat and builds a whole bunch of stuff for me while I sleep. I don't need to see that chat, I just want the finalized result, and you can send the results and any messages back to Telegram as if I was chatting to you in VS Code. Alrighty, so this thing thinks that it's done. Let's come and have a look at what's happening on Telegram. Hey, what can I help you with? I want you to build me a simple dashboard that just says hello world on it. So here we're just sending a basic test. I want to make sure that this thing's working. Apparently the flow, you send a message to Telegram, the handler receives it, it validates me. Claude Code session starts with your message. Claude does the work, whatever it is that we asked it to do, and the final response comes back to Telegram. So that's currently what we're testing here, and then after we've done that, I'm going to give it a really, really complex example and see just how well it can actually handle my requests. And look at that, just a few seconds later, completed in 33 seconds. The dashboard now displays simple hello world. Try run it. Okay, so I'm going to do that from here. Can you run that for me and just open it up on the local machine? Okay, so hopefully that means that we should see a pop-up window with my Edge browser very, very soon, showing the dashboard. And I definitely, there we go. I don't have context about what that refers to. Ah, there's a bug. That's an interesting bug, memory bug. So I thought it would have catered to that. Cool, so I see functionality is working. It allegedly built me a website, but when I asked a question, a follow-up question to that, it said it had no understanding of what that means, meaning it has no memory of my previous chat messages. How can we bake it in so that the conversations that I have with my bot and the Claude environment actually persist? I thought we baked in memory for all of this because essentially this is how Moltbot or OpenBot works. Okay, so this thing knows that there's no memory. Each Telegram message currently spawns a fresh Claude session with no memory of previous messages. The memory system, phase 1, stores facts and preferences, but not conversation continuity. Let me fix this by loading conversation history into each Claude invocation. Handler is running with conversation memory enabled. Loads the last 20 messages from messages.db for your chat, formats them as conversation history with timestamps. Claude now sees user assistant, cool. Persistent memory. Okay, so let's try that again. I might need to start a new chat for that, but let's just see. And there we go. So it opened it automatically. Hello world, this is the cheap little dashboard that we made earlier just to test our functionality. So I want to make sure that it came from here. Yep, there we go, done. The dashboard's now running and should have opened on your browser. Perfect. So now we have working memory. We pretty much have the exact same functionality as Moltbot, just much better because it's built off of actual frameworks that you can trust with a little bit of security baked in. And at this point, we could look at baking in some more security. Now, realistically, I'm not going to be doing that. But if you wanted to, you could just speak to this thing again and say, looking at our current environment, could you tell me what we could do to make this even more secure? I understand that we need to balance security, functionality, and speed. But I want to make sure that we're not doing anything in here that can damage my company, my business, my brand, or myself as a person. And could you identify some points where I should have a human in the loop that we currently do not have a human in the loop? Essentially, I'm asking you to do a risk assessment of our environment from both a governance perspective and a security protocol perspective. So that I would do something like that. I mean, that's not a perfect prompt. You could always get it to come up with a perfect prompt to you. You could give it to different agents. So I could put this folder in Gemini, or I could get Codex to come and have a look at the structure just by clicking on this button over here. And I could then get a different assessment from a different model, which can sometimes help if you're trying to get different perspectives on things. And then I would just hit enter and it would go and give me a bunch of stuff. It would come up with a plan. I would switch to plan mode. It would do that. And then I would, if you don't understand anything about security or anything like that, you can just trust it essentially that it's doing the best thing. One thing I would say is that you need to understand the more secure you make something by nature, the less functionality or the less speed you're going to have with this thing. So really, when you look at security in an organization, it's kind of a balance between those things. You can't have all three of them being 100%. It just cannot work because of the nature of how those things work with one another. Alrighty, and then because this is YouTube, we obviously need to build a business via Telegram because that's how it's done nowadays. So I need you to build me a website for my company Atomic Ops. I want you to grab all the context from the context folder about my business, and then I want you to build a website proof of concept for that. You should base it on modal.com. All the animations and the crazy things like that should be on there. My website colors should be an elegant charcoal with hints of sky blue or indigo. We should have a very interactive hero landing page that breaks down into our services and so on. You have full creative control. Make sure that it looks elegant and classy like modal.com. So I suppose the only thing left to do then is to check out that our memory is working as it should and anything else. Can you check out our working memory and just ensure that everything is working as it should? The persistent memory should be there. Is everything updating when it should be updating? Do we have any Telegram issues that I'm unaware of, such as message truncation? Do we have any issues with timeouts from Telegram, stuff like that? Audit complete. Memory is present with preferences. Cool. And we've got daily logs. That's good. Database, one entry. Daily log is sparse. Only one event recorded today. The memory write functions aren't being called frequently during sessions. The timeout in Telegram is too short. Big builds fail. Your YouTube app requests all timed out. So this was earlier during testing. DB log truncation, 500 characters. Outbound messages stored truncated. We need to fix that. Your failed requests, both the Atomic Ops website and YouTube tool requests, hit the 5-minute timeout. That's interesting because it still built the website. So I need to give it that information. I didn't know it timed out. Okay, go ahead and fix all of that stuff. Something to note is that the Atomic Ops website actually did build despite the timeout. So yes, we do need to fix the timeout issue, make it longer, whatever you need to do, but also know that it did finish. And I'll do some final testing and things like that before I dump these final files into the description below. But I definitely think you should be using this system over something like Moltbot, specifically because even before I added these features, you could pretty much build anything anyway, and there's no real reason to use Telegram to run your business. I think that's ridiculous. You sit down, work for 3 hours in a dedicated chunk, get this thing to build you tons of different things using multiple agents within this window. That's probably the best way to do it. Make sure you think about security and things like that. But apart from that, the only thing that really matters now is selling, because this thing can build anything for you. So your goal now should be focused on getting clients, sealing deals, and actually making some money so you can go and lie on a beach somewhere or do whatever it is you want to do. But I hope this video was helpful. You can leave some comments below. Otherwise, check out the videos on the screen right now. They're definitely going to help you. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one.